The road was crowded with pilgrims on their way to the Mela. They travelled in ekkas, clinging to them in half-dozens, in tongas, motor buses, cars, and on bicycles. They also travelled on foot, men and women and children plodding up the road with their faces wrapped in cloths to avoid being asphyxiated by petrol fumes and choked with the dust that rose from the dry verges of the road. There was a file of camels, each with a man on its back seated on a wooden saddle. There was even an elephant with a painted head, chained, all alone at the side of the road. It was chewing grass and swished its decorated trunk up and down, curling it delicately so that it looked like the initial letter on a page of illuminated manuscript, but one that was constantly changing its shape. It was a beautiful day. The plain was a sea of sprouting wheat and barley, dotted with groves of trees that were enchanting islands among the lighter green of the crops. It was a day of spring rather than winter, in which everything seemed to be burgeoning, all except the man-made objects, villages, tanks, and shrines, which were mostly crumbling into dust. But as the sun sank behind the trees and the shadows lengthened, the fields assumed the same uniform green-gauge colour as the river did when it flowed in the sunless places close to the high banks, except in one place, where a single shaft of sunlight filtered through a gap in the trees illuminated a whitewashed tomb. Then it disappeared. Low in the west, the sky became blood-red. Higher, it was purple. Overhead, it was deep blue, while low down, close to the earth in the fields, the smoke from the village fires hung in swags and trailed away among the trees in woods which were no longer Arcadian, but dark and mysterious-looking. Because of the huge crowds, the bridge of boats at Juhusi on the left bank of the Ganges had been closed to motor cars, and by the time we reached the Curzon Bridge at the big bend of the river north of the city, it was almost dark, and only the pools among the sandbanks upstream still shone in the last of the light. The bridge itself was jammed with bullock carts and tired pilgrims, men, women and children on their way to the Sangam. They were country people, and what belongings they had they carried in sacks slung across their shoulders. It was a moving sight. Eventually, we reached the fort, and from the ramparts looked out over the sandbank, which extended upstream for more than a mile from the confluence of the two rivers as far as the Izzat railway bridge. It was more like the camp of an army on the eve of a great action than a holy place. The sandbank was hidden from view by a blanket of low-lying fog and smoke, which was illuminated by the flickering light of the campfires and the glare of kerosene lanterns. The long lines of electric lights and long poles which marked the way to the bathing areas were the only lights actually to rise above the fog, while overhead the stars looked down, pale and remote. It was eerie, for, apart from a few hundred pilgrims who were seeing the night through huddled against the wall of the fort, there was not a human being in sight. Only a muted and continuous roar from the sandbank and the encampments announced the fact that 1 million people were settling down for the night. A sound that was punctuated by the beating of gongs and drums, the ringing of bells, the rumbling of trains on the railway bridges, and the noise of the loudspeakers which blared out injunction to this vast multitude on how it should comport itself the next day, on the morning of Makara Sankranti, when the sun and the moon would be of equal degree. At 5 o'clock the following morning, it was still dark. Down on the sandbank, the road which led from Akbar's great embankment on the north side of the fort to the landing place was itself a tributary river of human beings, all moving towards the Ganges. Down on the shores of the Jumna by the fort,